Well, Jack and Carmen, thank you for joining. I appreciate, especially on a Friday when you're probably, hopefully, just doing everything you can to get ready for the weekend, taking the time for this interview. And for everybody else who watches this in the future, we are having this interview because Jack and Carmen decided to write a book. And the book is titled Standing on Shoulders, A Leader's Guide to Digital Transformation. But before we get started, and just to throw things off because of what you said earlier, Carmen, I'm not going to tell anybody else on the call. Carmen, how would you describe yourself in 1 minute?
How would I describe myself in 1 minute? Well, I'm somebody who likes to learn. I like to help other people get better. I think I get more satisfaction out of seeing how I can help other people than necessarily what I'm doing myself. And I think that kind of has driven me towards, either roles that I had. I started out thinking I was going to be a professor, went to Bell Labs, but a lot of times I find myself in coaching, mentoring situations, and I think that's led to the kind of role I have right now at TaskStop, where I really enjoy working with clients and customers and seeing how together we can help them get better. That's what really gives me probably the most satisfaction.
Well, thank you. Jack, your turn. How would you describe yourself in 1 minute?
I would describe myself as being insatiably curious, and I'm always driven to leave things better than I found them. So continuous improvement has always been a part of my DNA. I started off on the business side. I was a unrepentant hacker and developer, and moved into IT to bring the commercial side of our company's focus to that part of our business. I went from being in business side as sales and marketing for about a dozen years and moved into IT, which is kind of an unusual direction to move, and then went back on my way going back to business. One of the things I really wanted to do in returning to consulting is bring the knowledge and experience and understanding of what our future state probably looks like back to the business side so they can take charge of their business and leverage technology in ways that they're probably not prepared to do today because of the way we've trained them. We as IT have trained our business folks how to respond to us, and I think it's time for them to sort of take charge again.
My apologies.
No worries.
My home office is a home studio and everything else. And by the way, if you look behind, I see you've got a football poster behind you, Carmen. I'm going to get one for my blog, but I have a year-round Christmas station. If you're wondering why the huge Santa Claus staring you in the thing. Whenever.
I love it. I love it. Reminds me of that one movie way back when, Prancer or something, when the girl in the movie celebrated Christmas all year round. So can't have too much Christmas. That's good.
I love those words. But let's get back to you guys instead. But yeah, well, we'll have a new banner hopefully in the future. Plus, I realized I didn't straighten the desk, so apologies to everybody else as this is where things kind of shift. And you might see cats while we're going. If you're really lucky, you'll see one launch from the chair up on my back in the middle of the, and it's a painful.
I like it. That would be awesome.
Yeah, you got a pretty good chance. Okay, the rest of the questions, fair game for either one of you. What inspired you to write Standing on Shoulders, A Leader's Guide to Digital Transformation? What made you decide to take all the time it takes and come up with that book?
Well, I think part of it, for me at least, was a realization that the things that had become so obvious to Carmen and I, we're very fortunate. Carmen and I worked together for about 5 years and sat next to each other. And it got to the point where we were finishing each other's sentences, it felt like. But we realized that what we thought was so incredibly obvious because we were so close to it was not at all obvious to other folks. And we had the opportunity to learn from a lot of folks and bring a lot of different kinds of learning together into one spot that would really help accelerate the understanding of these concepts and enable folks to apply them, especially at the senior leaders level, where we've really felt this frustration where those senior leaders, especially in the C-suite, have had folks from technology delivery, from software companies, from consulting companies, always with their hand out for money and resources to do a transformation. And then at the end, they never felt like they got what they were expecting to get. There was no real return. And part of it was because it was throw money and technology at a problem without understanding all of the underpinnings that were so important around culture, around behavior, and the way we treat people. And so it was a great opportunity for us to bring all of that together into, a fairly concise approach that would help them understand why they hadn't gotten the returns in the past and how they could leverage that today moving forward, and why they really needed to make a change in the organization to support this overall transformation so they would get what they've been looking for and have the understanding of the underpinnings to make it happen.
It makes sense, and I like what you said about kind of the thing I enjoy reading, but not everybody can read every book, right?
Right.
People are looking for an introduction, I would say, to Lean, to DevOps and Agile, stuff like that. This really does do a good job. Yet even in the end, I think I put this in my review, in the end, for some key areas, though, you actually say how to do it in the appendix, which is a really nice touch. But I definitely recommend, if you are watching this, if you're wondering about this DevOps and about Lean and about communication and culture and stuff like that, and you don't want to have to I'm not saying they shouldn't, but read the Phoenix Project and read the DevOps Handbook and read, you say, Mark Schultz's latest books and stuff. This would be a really good introduction. Next one, most inspiring. This is, some questions like the first couple are standard ones I ask every time I do a book interview. Next one, it hit me this time, is you write a book and people react to it. So the next few questions have to do with that. What is the most inspiring reaction so far that you've gotten about your book?
I guess I can go a little bit first. So part of my motivation, and really I needed somebody like Jack, I think, to partner with, because I'm basically, lazy. But
not true.
Yeah, I was blessed to learn a lot of stuff working at Bell Labs, and I think as I got into the DevOps movement, it wasn't like these concepts hadn't existed. Some of their roots go all the way back to Schuhart, Deming, and even some of the practices we had done at Bell Labs. We may not have marketed them as Agile and DevOps, but, having to build high performance, high availability systems basically from scratch, all those concepts and the ways you had to think about problems and the challenges, I felt like there was a story there that needed to be told. So I think from my perspective, some of the people that I probably hadn't talked to for, almost decades in some cases, because I left 2001, they read the book and really appreciated reliving those experiences and how I put them, relayed them to some of the modern DevOps practices. So I think hearing from some of those people from Bell Labs and getting that feedback and their appreciation, I guess, meant a lot to me.
Nice. Anything to add, Jack?
No, I'm thrilled with the way that the IT community has responded to this. And I'm even more thrilled that business folks are beginning to respond similarly. So the validation from the IT side was great, but for me, getting the response from senior leaders that this really is something that is helpful and useful has been the most thrilling part for me.
I think picking up on, I think if we were going to find across companies the area that is least mature from a DevOps and Agile standpoint, and that's not meant as a negative, we're all different places in our journey, it would be on the business side, because on IT it seems easy. We're used to changing the way we do things like that, newest technology, newest stuff. But on the business side, it's not DevOps really complete or Agile if the business is remaining in a yearly, say, financing system, those type of things. So,
right.
Okay, inspiring reaction. How about most surprising reaction? Any surprising reactions? Somebody say something or react in a way where you go, I didn't expect that out of reading your book?
Well, I'm always surprised that somebody is willing to pay more than a nickel for something I've written. So that's the most surprising part for me.
I paid for it twice, you know.
I know, I saw that. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
I have a rating, folks. If you look at you see, I've talked too much about myself, but if you look at my reviews, I have a rating, and a 5, which is the highest, means that you need to buy both the physical copy and the digital copy, which I did. Started with a digital copy, which, by the way, last I knew was still a great deal on Amazon. Okay, first highlight I have in the book: be the willow, not the oak. Better still, learn from the masters. Don't learn the hard way. You guys remember putting that in there?
I sure do. And I'll jump in here. And because when we look at the willow and the oak, those are two very different representations of strength. And when we look into a lot of Eastern thinking, the willow is much more commonly identified as a strength. And it's really around its resilience. But in both cases, they're both very firmly rooted where they are. And I think that relates to our values and what's important to us. We don't give up our values. However, if we try to resist change, if we are the stiff and mighty oak that is so strong, when the winds come along, eventually that oak will be broken because of the winds, as opposed to the willow, who responds to the changes. It ebbs and flows, whether it's with water or with air. And it actually ends up being much stronger in the long run and resilient because of its flexibility. And there's really no reason to reinvent the wheel. One of the things that was really important to me about this was the standing on shoulders part. And I think sometimes people struggle a little bit with what do you mean? What are you talking about, standing on shoulders? And it's really an acknowledgement that there have been so many people before us that are so much smarter than we are. And it's not that, we're particularly smart, although I will go on record as saying Carmen absolutely is a genius. But this is really about taking those lessons that have been learned in the past and bringing them together. And so there's no reason to make your own mistakes, that have already been proven before. Learn from other folks who have made those mistakes before. Make your own brand new mistakes that are different than those. But basically, take what you have been given, add your particular flavor to it, bring it to a new level, and then help the folks that follow. And that's what it is to learn from the masters. A lot of folks won't have even heard of Schuart before. And if it wasn't for Carmen, I don't know that I would have ever remembered that man. But, it's the opportunity to take those lessons and ingest them like we do with our kids, to help them not make the same mistakes that we've made by, teaching them in advance.
But that line, I'm glad you brought that up, Alan, because the line which actually Jack put in the book, so kudos to Jack, is the one. I've done a few book signings, and that line, people come up and will, most of the time they'll say something about the book, that line made an impact on them. So it's clear that that's resonating with a lot of folks as they start to read the book.
Obviously it stood out to me. And I think it's a good reminder. Often it's hard to put concepts into words, and it's got enough meat to it. It's not like just 2 words and, just do it, 3 words, right? But it's also concise enough you can remember it. And it's a good reminder. Even in conversations, if you think about it, how many times have we been in one of those uncomfortable, crucial conversations, and we need to be reminded this is the time to be the willow, not the oak, right? So as a matter of fact, I should note, when you guys talk about standing on shoulders, which works its way in the title, everybody should understand that right in the beginning in the introduction, the first shoulders you stand on are John of Salisbury, back from 1159. So you go back a good distance standing on shoulders. Okay, the other one, I had a lot of highlights. Another one that I liked, and when I tweeted my review of your book, Gene Kim reacted. Also, I should know Gene Kim does the introduction for everybody, so that tells you something else about the quality of this work. But I had included in my tweet, trust is inversely proportional to the number of dependencies in a release. That's the nerdy part of me that like that. But it says trust is inversely proportional to the number of dependencies in a release.
Carmen, that's you.
Yeah, what is that saying? Why do you think Gene Kim actually called it out? He really liked that, Carmen. Why do you think Gene liked that?
Well, I think, anytime Gene retweets you, right, that's when that means a lot, because obviously, all the great work and amazing things that Gene's done in the community and the books. I think he liked it because it probably clearly was a synopsis of something that is a theme in a lot of the DevOps discussions and things that we have, right? It's interesting. That part of the book actually came from a series of blog posts that I did with Lee Reed and Sanjeev Sharma, and on the math and the calculus of DevOps. And at the time, I was a little concerned because it actually tries to go into the mathematics of why some of these concepts make sense. And, we actually have math formulas. And I was thinking, okay, I wonder how that's going to play. It was one thing having a blog post, but I think there's like about a half a dozen of those synopsises there. Like, I think another one is, the yield is dependent on the frequency of releases, or there's 3 or 4 of them that try to provide a summary of some of this math. And I think Gene liked it probably because it captures something we talk about a lot, is if you trust is a key part of everything we're trying to do from an agile DevOps, accelerated delivery, value stream management perspective. And it's trust in how we work, who we work with, our environment, and that component is very powerful. And part of that is around dependencies. And Dominica DeGrandis talks a lot about this. The more things you're dependent on, the more things all have to line up in order for things to go well. So I think it was probably a pithy way of summarizing a lot of concepts that we know to be true, kind of like, the more whip you have, the less productive you're going to be. The more dependencies you have, the lower your trust is going to be in what you're trying to do. And of course, then that drives you to a lot of things we talk about: smaller batch sizes, more frequent releases, all those kinds of concepts. So I'm thankful that you tweeted it and that Gene appreciated it, because I do think, there's a few things in that section maybe that try to summarize why some of these concepts make sense, tying them almost the math to some of these practices that we now take as these DevOps practices.
And by I would say it's more than just trying to tie them to math. If people look, it does tie them to math in the book. It's a section called the Math of DevOps, and I think it's nice because often the got you with a lot of pithy statements is people can say really smart things that actually underneath are meaningless, whereas the book actually shows no, you can actually build some math around this. And I think it's interesting too, because when you don't have trust, there's no snowball sometimes. Because if you think about it, in the book Accelerate, so I've told people, if I pull down too many books, you might hear a crash at one time. But in Accelerate, oh, wrong one. You know this one too.
Right.
Right next to Accelerate. There we go. But Accelerate talks about how cabs, approval boards, right? Change approval boards really don't improve the quality of what goes into production, but they slow things down. But what happens if you have low trust? What are people going to do? They're going to actually force cabs. So whatever we can do to increase trust, not only does it snowball if you don't have trust, the opposite kicks in. Things go faster, people are happier, there's more trust. And I like that you have the math. And I think, again, if somebody's going to remember quotes, that's a great quote. And I can't remember who I sent it to after I first found it, but it's very important. Okay, we're going downhill now. A few more questions left. What are the top 3 things? And I give 3 as a number. If you want to do 1, whatever. But what are the top 3 things you want people to take from standing on shoulders?
You can go first one, Jack.
Okay. I think the most important thing is understanding how the culture of the organization is necessary to support this kind of a move. One model that resonates with me is losing weight. If you are trying to lose weight and you're successful at that, but for whatever reason you haven't adjusted the way you eat, you haven't adjusted your exercise levels, the weight will end up coming back. And that's the same kind of concept with the transformations that have not worked out so well for us in the past, that we haven't put in the constructs that will enable it. And most importantly is this focus on people and building trust through the focus on them. I love the way that Sir Richard Branson always talks about being very, very focused on his employees. He doesn't talk about the customer. And, if you could argue that Jeff Bezos, who does totally talk about focus on customer, he's a richer man, but I think that Sir Richard Branson has a better approach in the long run, that by focusing on our customer, our employees, and being, very focused on them, and really showing in how we act and how we structure our organization and the way we behave enables those employees then to become fully invested and look at this as a mission. The other part I would focus on is the focus on value. I really think that the successful transformations will be very, very focused on people and very focused on their mission, and helping get all of their people, all of their resources of all kinds aligned with their core mission. Value stream mapping and value stream management is really about that, in my opinion. And I think that's the most interesting and the most important thing to take away.
Thank you. And I don't know. Just one of the things I like about the book. I've heard a lot of people talk about the importance of value stream mapping, but yours was the first book that actually, other than books about value stream mapping, yours was the first book that actually put in the appendix, okay, guys, here's a way to go about it. So thank you. Carmen, any thoughts you want to add? Things if people are going to walk away with anything from your book, what do you want them to walk away with?
Yeah, and I think what Jack said about culture is, key, right? We used to say the technology is the fun part, the culture is the challenge. If you don't get the culture right, no tool is going to save you. This is a journey. I mean, there's a section of the book that talks about Dickens and the concept of, Tale of Two Cities. It's the best of times, it's the worst of times. As you're going through this journey, there are things you're going to do that are incredible and you're going to feel great. And then you're going to walk into your next meeting and try not to pound your head into the wall because of the practices that are still in existence. And that's part of the journey. And you have to be patient and persistent. And you really have to use those victories, those success stories. Those are key to changing the culture, because people need to realize this is possible here, not just in a unicorn, right? Not just in some other company. This is possible here. And once they start to see that, going back to Deming and quality circles, and those people have the ideas. The leaders need to do the systems thinking and provide that psychological safety, that environment, as Jack said, that allows them to learn and improve. And those are the organizations, I think, that are going to flourish into the next decade, because we know, we're in this series of disruption. Carletta Perez, Otto Mixbook talks about the age of software and all the disruption we're seeing. And companies really need to turn their view of IT from one as a cost center to a profit center. And the way you're going to do that is you have to unleash that innovation that your people have to experiment and get better. And those companies will do well. It will always do well because they do have that focus on their people and their culture and continuous improvement.
I don't remember who, I was trying to look it up quickly, didn't succeed, but there's somebody who said, culture eats strategy for breakfast. You guys remember that quote? It shows up.
Yeah, that's Peter Drucker. We talk, I don't know if we put that in our book or not, but yes.
I might have picked it up here, but.
It is, and I think more than once, actually.
Yeah.
Well, I did a presentation and I included that in it because and it's funny how these all work together. Like to me, what you were just saying about depending on the people versus leadership, take the system view, help people do it, but getting people to actually come up with the ideas. It is Goldratt who talks about the emotion of the inventor and the theory of constraints, right? And all these things just fit together so nicely. And the other thing I would say is earlier, I think, Jack, you were talking about where sometimes I'll admit at work, sometimes I get frustrated and people don't look up where I work. I work for a great place, but I'm human. Sometimes I get frustrated because it's sort of like there's already an answer. We're wondering how we could do this. Can I get you to read the book, right? And it doesn't matter if this one or Accelerate, we're working some metrics from here. There's already an answer. People have figured it out. And that's one of the things they figured out, right? The smaller the teams, the more people are allowed to innovate, the better it works out. So.
And I think you're referring, the obviously Goldblatt, and the goal was you need to have the right KPIs, right? And
Yep.
Bezos talks about proxy metrics. But if you're not really looking at your entire value stream and your flow of business value, then you could be falling into the example of the robots in the book around that local optimization. So how many of us are doing local optimizations? You have to get out of that silo of local optimization and apply that systems thinking to actually improve what you're doing for the business. And that's key to being successful.
And that's where I think the leaders come in, right? Because it's hard for somebody on the ground just to see outside their area and they'll have good ideas. It's the leaders that can guide that.
Exactly.
The final caveat, I do work for a great company and we're not all messed up. But there are times I wish I could get them to read a book that I just read too. A couple more questions. Have you learned anything new since you wrote the book that you wish you could add? Anything that you say, man, I wish I'd put that in there? Anything?
Yes, I'll start and let Carmen finish. But Simon Sinek, his golden circles are something that I wasn't aware of that explicit approach, and I've absolutely fallen in love with that to help folks refocus on their mission, ensuring that the what you're in existence to do, your core mission becomes that focus. And then really once you have that, it really enables you to do the other things. I would say that, our book as it stands really comes in after you've made that self-assessment or that rediscovery of your reason for being. And so I would love to have a mulligan to put that in there.
Second edition.
Yeah, I think, we were writing you briefly about Mick's book. We were writing this at the same time Mick's book was going on. I was actually helping review it. So it was kind of interesting, but probably a lot of the concepts in Mick's book, I think we shed light on how to actually go through that journey, right? Because a lot of times, and getting back to the example of value stream mapping, right? People can look at their current state and look at their future state. That's great and that's necessary. But the hard part is how do you get there?
Yep.
It's not a linear path. You have to build scaffolding. There are times when you're going to do things that you realize, okay, this is not the most expedient way, but it's the necessary way because from a cultural perspective, I have to go here because that's the place I have to take the culture first. So I think, the book in context, I think, provides kind of the ways to go through that journey that maybe, Carletta Perez and Mick talks about in his book, to get from that current to your future state and the things you have to go through. And it's going to be different for every company. Somebody who comes in there and says, I know exactly what you should do. Well, your shield should go up. How can you possibly know anything about our culture and our environment?
Yeah.
What you can, though, help people learn is how you can get this continuous improvement mindset, understanding where you are, where you need to get to, how to get there, and how to apply those concepts. Because long after some of the tools that we mentioned or that are in the marketplace, they are gone, some of the concepts in that book are still going to be with us, just like Deming, Schuhart, all these concepts. Those are the things that we want to resonate and stay with people so they can continue to apply those on their own journeys.
Jack, anything you would add?
No, I great job, Carmen, as always.
I think you
Exactly.
like each other.
I'm a big fan of Carmen. He is a super smart and a super great guy.
Well, he also gives you credit too, and I would hope you. I mean, we always hear about people like musicians who hated each other, and somehow they still came out with good music. But in general, I would hope that people who co-author a book actually are at least somewhat fond of each other. So, if you could, okay, this is separate for each one of you. I'll start with you, Jack. If you could recommend one other book for people to read other than yours, what would that be and why?
I would go with the DevOps Handbook. That is a book that in all honesty, I took a couple of runs at it. I wasn't ready for it the first time I started to read it, which I'll also call out Carmen has been on that page and the Phoenix Project as well. And I would say that is the one. If I had to pick one for our, especially our leaders and technology practitioners, I think that would be the one I would pick.
Carmen?
So I guess I'll cheat a little. I guess I have two, right? So I'm I've been kind of blessed throughout my career, right? In Bell Labs and then Nationwide, got to work with great folks, got to sit next to Jack for many years and sometimes just eavesdrop. And then now I'm at TaskTop. So the book you showed, right? Mixed book, Project to Product, I think, is a great book. I think people are using this as a way to reinvent their companies, another look at how to move to a product model. And I think our book aligns very well with that then of how to go on that journey. And then the other book, somebody else I'm fortunate to work with, Dominica DeGrandis, is Making Work Visible. And again, we talk about that a lot in our book also, but those concepts I think are at the heart of how to get through this journey, right? If your work is invisible, if you aren't being able to see things, you don't really know at any point in time what's happening. That's a key component of any kind of improvement process. So I think those books served as sort of the inspiration. We use them. We reference them a lot. Obviously, you can't go wrong with any of Gene's books, the Phoenix Project, DevOps Handbook. But those two books also resonate, I think, and go well with concepts in our book.
And I would agree. Gene, as a matter of fact, when Mick came out with his book, basically he used different words. He wasn't being redundant, but he basically said it was a game changer. He says there are not many books that I would say will change how things are done, but he said Mick's would. And we're using Making Work Visible right now within my department, because I've got a relatively small department, and I still can't tell you all the work we're working on. And the other nice thing about her book, as like with yours, is it tells you how. It doesn't just give you all kinds of theories and you say, man, that sounds awesome. Now, how am I actually going to translate that into actually getting something done? She actually has a lot of exercises, meeting agendas, literal meeting agendas on how to do it. So I think they're all good choices. And in fairness to you, Jack snuck in a second book too. He started with a DevOps, but then he snuck in the Phoenix Project. So,
well, and I think what Jack and I resonate with, and what we were trying when we worked together, is we wanted to take some of these concepts and apply them to practices to help people actually get better, right? I think we were both very motivated with how can we help and how can our teams help coach people to get better, and getting down to those ideas of these concepts, but how can you make them real here? And so I think that's where I have that appreciation. I think that's what we tried, that's what we were working on in our book, is giving something very, yes, you can tie it to these concepts, but it's also very practical advice of how to do this so that you can start to see the improvement and make the change in your own company, which is, I think would bring us the most joy, is actually seeing people say, yes, I've done this and it's working for me. And that's, I think, in the end, what it's really about as far as motivation.
Well, it's still a relatively new book, so it has a lot of time to have that effect. And as I think I mentioned when I tweeted about it, for me it was a very apropos, serendipitous timing, because when you want to move forward with these things, often you don't know how to do it. And I do have a book on value stream mapping, but as you've probably noticed, usually what are they talking about? What industry? Factories, right?
Right.
And in software, it's hard. It's hard to know exactly. As a matter of fact, almost every book that even speaks about in software, still, if they show an example value stream map, what's it from? A factory.
Right.
See one where they put one in there. So I do think that it could have that effect very easily, where people are finally saying, okay, great, awesome ideas. How am I going to get this done? Okay, final question. Any final thoughts, either of you, that would like to share?
I'd like to go back to something that you mentioned earlier that I think is really important, and that is that this is a journey. You don't do this and be done. And the other part is that journey starts from where you are. And it's important to start from where you are and move forward. And you don't have to get it all figured out at one time, that you'll make mistakes on that journey. That while we're not all starting from the same place and we're not all going to end up at the same place, we do have some very common experiences. And by sharing those experiences with other folks, sharing our journey, we can help them see, maybe reflected through us, through the things that we do well and where we fail, how they can do better, and just to continue that journey and figure it out as they go and iterate and get better.
Yeah, and actually, I think Jack just took the words out of my mouth. I mean, I think that's really key, and I'm glad Jack brought that up, because that was something I've just been thinking about. And we talk about this in the book. I mean, you have to start somewhere. Start small, right? I remember, maybe you're in a company, that is a Fortune 100, 500 company. You may have 20, 30 business portfolios. You don't have to convince all 30 of them to do something. You just need to find one. You need to find Dominica talks about the coalition of the willing. Find one leader, one area that you can run an experiment with, because then running that experiment, and as Jack said, you're not going to get it perfect, but that's okay. You're going to learn, and you're going to get successes. You're going to have stories, and those people are going to be your best speaker. They're going to do the PR for you, because it's their stories. That's what's going to change the culture. So get started on that journey, and that's the key. I think a lot of times people are just paralyzed where to start, and hopefully what our book really focuses on is, well, here's ways to start. Start small, get going, build some successes, then that will propel you further on this journey across your organization.
I think it's Patton said something to the respect. I don't have the exact wording, but he said something to the respect of, I would rather have a good plan right now than a perfect plan sometime in the what he talked about, basically the unknown future, right? So,
right.
Go ahead.
A good plan executed vigorously today is better than a perfect plan tomorrow.
There you go. And ultimately, the other thing that hit me as you two were talking about is that I do think that we sometimes in a journey we can be very judgmental, and we act like we have to acknowledge that where we are now is bad, right? And to me, that's not it, right? You're just acknowledging where you are, and then you're working with it. I do metrics a lot, and I tell people metrics aren't good or bad, especially when you first start them, right? They're just numbers. If they can be trended, if they lead to good questions, then they've done their job. And I would say the same thing kind of with this journey, right? There are tools in here, and you need to take the tools from the book. Well, you don't need to. I recommend you take the tools from the book and do it. But don't feel bad if it appears based on the book that you're immature. Take advantage of the fact that now you can go. And I love, Carmen, your note about basically acknowledge where you're at. if you come in like a bull in a china shop, nothing happens. That's zero progress, right? But if you make those minor tweaks and people see it, then it builds on it.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Alan. I think Jack and I talk about current state, right? You can't be overly critical current state, right? You work for a great company. We've worked for great companies. They've paid a lot of bills. They've given a lot of people jobs. They in our case, protected a lot of people when they were in dire need. So you can't be overly critical. On the other hand, you have to always be open to continuous improvement.
Yeah.
And so you have to have that balance of, yes, current state's done a lot of great things, but how can we get better? And it's that Jack talks about this, that relentless pursuit of getting better and improving. That's what's going to motivate you and drive you along this journey.
I'd actually like to add one more thing to that, is that we want to have failures in our process, because we never learn, we don't learn much from our successes. And by getting things wrong, it gives us the opportunity to reevaluate. If we had gotten it sort of right in the first time, we wouldn't have learned nearly so much. So make mistakes. In fact, maybe even do some anti-patterns to prove that you move the needle the wrong way when you do those, and to enable you to get to a much better place through that contrast between what works and what doesn't, to make the mistake, to learn the lesson better, and move yourself even further forward.
That's it. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just, I mean, mistakes are great opportunities for learning, right? And you need to take advantage of those.
I don't know. It just seemed like Jack was recommending Chaos Monkey for processes or something.
Amen.
I think that's a great thought to end on, and all the more reason. So Jack, you're a consultant, right?
That's right.
All the more reason to look up Jack and bring him into your company. Carmen works for TaskTop, an awesome company with not just great tools, but great consulting. Correct, Carmen?
Right.
And so Jack, it's the first that you and I have met. Carmen and you and I have spoken before. I really do thank both of you for taking the time for this. I hope that the rest of your Friday goes quickly. Jack, that you get rest from your trip. Carmen, that you stop having early morning call. Although I guess you're 2 hours later than me, so it wasn't way too early morning. But you avoid the early morning calls, and you both have a great weekend.
Thank you, Alan. Thank you very much for having us.
Thank you, Alan. Appreciate it very much.